So the next stage now is to try to add the tone. Now most people will just have an HB pencil. What I would suggest you do there is try to build up the tone as much as you can when you're trying to make darker tones, and to try not to apply too much pressure. Just try to build it up where you can. If you're able to get access to darker pencils such as a 2B or 4B, this would really help you with the darker tones. So let's have a look, although we aren't doing colour just now, at a version I've started which is in colour, and I'm going to talk about this for a particular reason. This example here isn't finished, however what you can start to see is the light source. So the light source is over on this side here, okay, and the reason we know that is because you can see the shadows on the opposite side of the objects. So that we know the light source is somewhere up here towards the right hand side, and you can see the shadows below the objects and to the left of the objects. So essentially the light source is coming from that opposite direction, above and from the right. We can then go back to this. What I'll do here is just put a little arrow just to remind me of the light source. Here I'm working from a photograph, not from the painting I've just shown you. So you need to do the same. You need to find that photograph on the team in the appropriately titled folder. It could be the tea party theme or the tool shed, for example. And remember, you're looking for a development photo, not an investigation photo. It specifies within each of these folders where you can find those development photos. And try to make sure that you include the objects you've previously drawn in your investigation when you are choosing that photo. So for example, I may previously have drawn a French fancy or a teapot, and I would make sure that whatever photograph I choose features those particular objects. Okay, so what I'm going to do here is start with the tones that are a little bit darker, because those are the ones which are actually easier to see. I'm just going to give a really brief demonstration on this. So I've identified the light source, I've firmed up my drawing a little bit. I might fix it as I go through. There's one or two things I think need to be improved. What I'm going to do now is I like to turn my paper round when I'm trying to shade in a particular direction. So I'm trying to shade across the way with a slight curve, and I find it easier, rather than trying to do it in quite an awkward way like this, to actually just turn my paper round and to get the directional shading that way. Remember that curvy surfaces need curved lines of shading to build up the tone, and flat surfaces need straight lines of shading. And this is going to really accentuate the type of form that they are, either flat or curvy. So you can see here I'm not really pressing too much. This pencil is a 2B. I could probably get a fairly similar tone with an HB, but because I have the 2B, I'm using it. If you don't have one, please feel free just to use the HB. You don't really need anything lighter than that. So I'm using quite soft strokes. I'm really quite often just brushing the pencil across the paper rather than really pressing. You might have to press a little bit more to get a variation in your tone if you're working solely with an HB. So you can see here, you can't really see any of the lines in my shading, and that didn't really take very long. Okay. So let's look for another dark area so we can take this a little bit further, and I can show you again. What you need to do in most cases, and this is quite a flat surface, so I'm going to use flat lines. This is the shadow underneath the tea towel. In most cases you want to blend your tone from dark to light. So in the shadow in particular, depending on the light source, quite often it just sort of fades out and is quite soft. In this particular image, it does have a slightly sharper edge, but I don't want to show you that just now. What I'm trying to show you here is the technique of blending from dark into light. So what I'm trying to do is just really find the edge of that tea towel and then start to build up a little bit of tone. I'm just going over it again on the side where it should be darkest. As I work my way out, I'm just getting lighter and lighter with the pressure I'm applying. You shouldn't really, in most cases, need to smudge with your fingers. You can do the work with the pencil. In fact, it's quite a good idea to try to get used to doing it that way rather than relying on your finger to do that work, because then you don't learn how to do it properly. So really just get used to blending, being sensitive and soft with your pencil and taking your time. So you can see here we're starting to build up a couple of areas of shading there. I'm then going to go on to start in these objects building up some of the medium and the light tones as well. What I'll do in the meantime is just really start to add the dark tones first in some of the other areas. Now, what I would also say is, in real life, you don't see, generally speaking, any objects that have some sort of dark outline around them. They have an edge, but it's not like a window frame. It doesn't have this sort of dark border around it. So if you have, like I have here, so you can see it, if you've drawn these dark outlines, these need to be blended in. You can see in the case of the tea towel now, all you can see is an edge and a shadow. You can't see this dark line. So by the time you have finished, what you want to do is make sure that you can no longer see the outline, you're just seeing an edge. So blend that in, or where you feel it should be lighter, just maybe rub that initial line out a little bit so it's a wee bit lighter. Keep moving your paper around when you're trying to do your blending as well, especially when you're trying to curve your lines. I just find that much more comfortable than trying to shade it in a really awkward way. And there's no reason why you can't turn your paper around. So in most cases, certainly in this particular image, I'm using quite a lot of curved lines of shading. You can see here that there is a certain amount of blending that still requires to be done. I'm still getting a little bit of an edge here, and that's quite an area that needs a little bit of blending in still. Okay, but I'm trying where possible to keep going with those curvy lines, because if I don't use curvy lines on this plate, I'm going to make it look really, really flat. Now, what I'll do later, once I have got more of the dark tones and the medium tones, and even some slightly lighter tones, which will achieve just by not really adding very much tone at all. So for example here, I might do next to nothing because I want a really light tone. Then I'm going to do at the very end the highlight, so we'll talk about that a little bit later once I've got this a bit further on. But essentially, just as a wee quick reminder, most areas should have some sort of tone. Dark, dark to medium, medium, medium to light, and light. There aren't very many areas on your image that have absolutely no tone at all. Where they are actually looking really quite white, those are what we call highlights, or where the light is hitting your object and it might look quite shiny. So you would do this right at the end, and I'm just doing this to show you just now. Those would be the areas where you make it a rubber. Okay, what you might do there is really just try and add that back in there. Okay, so you've got the edge of the plate and a little bit of a highlight. So what I'm going to do just now is just do a little bit more shading in here so I can show you the contrast. I don't want an edge, so I'm blending this in. But I think you can start to see here how I can use a nice clean rubber, just a little corner, to get a bit of a highlight. You unfortunately can't see it particularly well because I don't have a lot of the other tone done yet, so I'm going to add a bit more of that in and then we'll come back to it. So just to recap, curvy surfaces have curvy lines of shading. So what I would do in something like this cup is just echo the curve from the bottom in my shading, a bit like doing the bottom of an ellipse. Okay, so curvy surfaces have curved lines of shading, and flat surfaces such as these here, you could use straight lines. Okay, so what I would probably do in the cup is do a little bit of a combination of going up and down the way and also across the way to build the tone up. If you ever think you've gone too dark, you can just get the rubber and take a little bit off and then go again. Okay, so let's give that a go. Good luck, folks.